Well, we just about reached the halfway point of the season, everyone. There's a lot to talk about, a lot to get into. I welcome my friends from That American Football Show to come and chop it up with me to break down the second half of the season. Man, this is the halftime show. Let's go.
We doing everything they talk about. You know I'm everything a boss about. Not putting work and gotta toss them out. I'm really biting, they just barking out. I'm really riding, they just parking now. His street, what to talk about. See the big H when I'm walking out.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Base Coverage, presented to you by KNoah Teamwear. I'm your host, Jamal Clay, and we've officially reached that turning point in the season, the halfway mark. We're going to reflect a little bit on the season thus far, talk about some things to look forward to in the second half. But before we dive into all that, I'm going to welcome my friends from That American Football Show, Adam and Joe, into the mix to come and chop it up. What's up, fellas? How you doing? Welcome to the show.
Yeah, good. Thank you, mate.
Sorry, mate. I don't know what's going on with my mute button there. No, I'm very good. Thank you. How are you doing?
All good, man. Hey, we reached almost at half point mark in the season, and obviously things are going to start picking up steam in terms of matchups and a lot of things that we want to dive into as we head towards playoffs and championship season. But based on what we've seen on the first half of the season so far, Adam, I'll start with you. Talk to me about a team or a player that you've been impressed with the most in the first half of the season.
So I'll go for a team and a player. I've written a few options down, so I've kind of been narrowing them down in my head. I'll say player I'm most impressed with, but I think it might be fairly obvious, Quinton Pounds. I mean, last year he was on the team with Madre London, who was the star of the ELF. Like Quinton Pounds, we interviewed him. He's a really nice guy, but the season wasn't what we expected from him. Yeah. And now this season, he's just blown us away with he makes all the plays he can. He's thrown the ball. He's done literally 90-yard catches and runs. It's incredible. Team I'd go with, I'm surprised by. I'm probably going to put the Raiders in there because they started a little flat, but I think last 2 weeks, they've really kind of shown their stuff on that. They deserve to be at the top of the league.
What about you, Joe? Team or player you're impressed with so far in the first half?
Yeah, so the team, even though they've been on a bit of a lost streak recently, the Ryan Fire really took me by surprise those first 3 games. Yeah, they obviously, I think Matt Adam is a lot better than a lot of people expected. He wasn't ranked too high as a quarterback, but I've been fairly impressed with what I've seen. And they've had some, big players, especially Robitaille's come in and look really good. So the Ryan Fire and how they've been coached. And apart from last week where I think when they played the Sea Devils, where they sort of let themselves down a little bit, I've just been impressed with just the professionalism of them. So they're my team. Player is Alejandro Fernandez from the Barcelona Dragons. I just think when you're on defense, you need that guy who's going to be there to make big plays, and their defense has been incredibly solid this year. Yeah. But I think back to that Cologne game, that was such a big turning point. You see what's happened to Cologne since that game. You see what's happened to the Dragons since that game.
Haven't been the same. Exactly.
That back down that he got off Jan Weinrich really did wonders for their season. And for me, he's been a 9 out of 10 every single game that they've played so far. So for someone that was probably a bit under the radar and has really been a staple in one of the best teams this year, Fernandez for me for sure.
And going back to your Ryan Fire pick, right? Do we know what's going on with Timothy Canoodle? I haven't seen him much.
I don't know.
He's been pretty quiet lately.
Yeah, because me and Joe always seem to be starting him in fantasy, and he never really does much.
He's been letting us down a bit recently, but I'm not sure.
We've seen Harlan Kofi, and obviously Nathaniel Robitaille is a beast, but that's something that that's something to definitely take a look into because he's if you have Robitaille, Kofi, and Canoodle on the field at the same time, and you're able to get them involved. That's going to easily reduce the coverage on Nathaniel Robitaille, even open up the run game as well. But so I'm gonna go the player route. So there's actually 2 players that I've been impressed with this season so far. One of them, and actually both of them I have to go to my backyard in the defensive backfield. But William James for the Leipzig Kings. Ooh. I mean, for the signings that they had on defense, we knew their front seven was going to be legit, but he's been able to provide some leadership and be able to make a lot of plays in the on the back end. And I think he's tied with 3 interceptions on the season so far. So his impact has been just as important as the signing of JP or Mike Tavares or any of those guys on the front. So William James is definitely someone that I've been impressed with. And I'm going to go with another defensive back, go down to Barcelona, and Jordi Brugnani.
Yeah.
Adam's favorite.
So Jordi last season played mostly safety, and Nico was that corner, and they flipped them this year. And Jordi's had a great season so far, being able to go up against the guys like a Nathaniel Robitaille or like a Quentin Pounds and hold his own. And he's also tied with William James for 3 interceptions this year as well. So, those two DBs are some guys that I've been impressed with the first half of the season, and some that we'll definitely have to take a look to see how they play the remaining and going into the second half, especially since both of those guys are on teams that are in playoff contention. So now let's flip the question a little bit. All right. And I'll start with Joe on this one. Give me a team or a player you think needs to have a better second half of the season in order to, possibly make a playoff push.
Okay, so a team that I think needs to turn it around, and we've been seeing it recently, is the Leipzig Kings. You've just mentioned there, of course, about William James and that front seven they've got on the defense. So strong. The defense, to be honest, they've been great. There's some of the numbers that they've picked up offensively, which kind of ties into my player, which I know Jordan Barlow, look, he's a bit banged up at the moment.
Yeah.
And I think he had a good first game. And then even he will admit that, he feels like he should have done better, especially in those 2 losses that they had that came afterwards. But we saw last week, even with his injury, that he's possibly starting to turn the corner and starting to improve. He had 2 throwing touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns coming off the bench with that shoulder injury. So for me, I think it is just based on the Kings. They have been a bit of a letdown. Yeah. I don't think many people expect them to lose their first 3 games. They've got the last 2 under their belt, and now they're going to look to push on. I know that you've got them beating the Raiders this week, so you're kind of you're expecting them to push on even further.
I think they're turning the corner.
Exactly, and it would be nice to see, because I know there's been a lot of they've not been too sure what's going on behind the scenes with the stadium, etc., and where they're based. And that can always affect what happens on the pitch. So I've kind of given them the benefit of the doubt, but it looks like things have settled now. And I think the Kings can definitely, I think they need to, and I think they can as well, adds a bit of substance behind that.
Alan, what about you, my man?
So what I've written down, I've given 2 options. One is Jordan Barlow / Kings. So I'll skip over that. And I actually put this team in both impressed and frustrated. I've put the Cologne Centurions, because as kind of Joe mentioned with Fernandez, they started off so impressive. They were going against the Dragons. They nearly beat them. Defense was keeping them in games, and the offense was powering them through. But then last 2-3 weeks, I've kept, but when we're doing our power rankings, the week before last, we had Cologne above the Galaxy and the Raiders, and we got a lot of flack for that. And then the week after, they had another pretty poor performance. I was like, they don't deserve to be that high right now, because they looked like they had so much fun and so much potential. They got Quentin Pounds and a probable offensive MVP. And then it is the O-line. I mean, I think Weinreich's brother, who is on the O-line, is just retired.
Yeah.
They've had a couple of injuries across the line, and that's definitely the problem. But they need to fix it quickly, because if they get 1 or 2 more big losses, they have no chance of making the playoffs behind the Fire and the Dragons.
Yeah, we talk about, Cologne, their O-line being a problem, right? I think that's effect of the Rhein Fire coming into the league. They lost a lot of guys this offseason to the Rhein Fire, and we're talking about a team that was the number 1 offense in the league last year. So now we're starting to see, some of those deficiencies come into play, but, obviously it's still a long season. Their defense has to play a lot better. Even if the defense can hold the team to 21 points, their offense is capable of putting up 40.
Exactly.
So they're not complimenting each other right now either. So it's definitely something that, we're going to have to keep an eye on, but the season could come to an end real early if it's not fixed within the next week or 2 for them. Team that I think needs to have a better second half. And, you know, we talk about the Leipzig Kings. This team kind of has the opposite effect where they started off hot and they lost their past couple games, and that's the Russ Law Panthers. Obviously, injuries have played a role into that with William Lloyd being out, injuries on the offensive line, switching quarterbacks. But this team is in a conference that's still obtainable. Like, obviously, Hamburg is, you know, doing what they got to do. They're getting better week in, week out. But there's still ground to make up looking at the schedules for the teams in that Northern Conference where they could possibly win that division. But they need to have a way better second half now, especially how they started, if they're going to at least make a playoff push for the conference. I don't think the second team or the fourth seed is coming from the Northern Conference. So if they're going to make the playoffs, they're going to have to win. They're going to have to win that conference.
Yeah, like it ties into something I've got later, but that conference is so interesting because you've got the Sea Devils clearly at the top there. I don't think they're going to get knocked off there. Then you've got the Panthers, the Kings, and the Thunder, who are all good enough to make it if they can.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's switch over to the first half of the season. We've seen amazing games, obviously, you know, and some big time performances and stuff like that, you know, and, you know, we're at the point where it's like, all right, like who's gonna start making that push for, you know, the MVP candidates. So what I want to do is I want to come up with a list right now, and we'll go down one by one. So I'll ask Joe, I'll ask Adam, and then I'll chime in too. But let's create a list of 5 guys right now that we think belong in that MVP candidate pool. So, Adam, I'll start with you on this one. Give me one guy you think belongs in that MVP candidate. I think I know where you're going, but
yeah, I've got to give it to my boy Zach Edwards.
Yeah, Zach's been having a phenomenal season.
Yeah, I love it because he's a friend of us. Like we keep in touch with him, and the best thing is that team's doing great, but they're having so much fun doing it.
Oh my god!
Like if you follow them on any social medias, like they've got this like little dance craze going. Every game, like we've discussed this on our podcast, but that team doesn't win with just Zach Edwards. They win with everyone, but he's just fantastic. He takes so many hits. He runs the ball as hard as he can. He's got some nutty throws off. Like he is in a fantastic situation, but he is a big motor in that team.
Most definitely. They're the pretty girl at the dance, right? They're the team everyone wants to watch. Everyone's following. Everyone's checking stats. Everyone's looking for, you know, what are they doing after the game, and it also reflects their fan base with how crazy those guys are and the character, you know, that their fan base has. So Barcelona is definitely a team to watch. I definitely agree with you on that point. Joe, who you got?
So I'm gonna go stay on offense. I'm gonna go with our fellow compatriot Glenn Tunga. He just keeps getting better and better each week. He's got strength, he's got speed, he's got the intelligence to find the gaps and make the runs. He's an unstoppable force. No one has really managed to. I mean, the Dragons did a fairly good job when they played Hamburg, but no one else has really even come close to stopping this guy. And as me and Adam talked about a fantasy, he's in there every week. Like it's a non-negotiable. He's in there every single week because you know he's going to be the running back with most yards. He's starting to hit those 200-yard games at the moment, and he's well on his way to 1,000 yards already. And for me, he's in that top 5. I just think there's no real argument. He's just such an impressive player, and I'm so glad we've got him in the ELF. Yeah,
and let me ask you this, and this is not to discredit Glenn, the Sea Devils, or the offensive line, right? But how much credit can we give former offensive coordinator Kurt Heinrich?
Yeah.
Based on his success with Cologne last year, and now what his offensive scheme has done for the Sea Devils as well.
True. And that's very true.
And that's not to take any credit from Glenn or Madre or any of them. But whatever scheme that they have, obviously it's a power run scheme. It's working. And if you have the right back, they're gonna do what they got to do. And you know, credit to Glenn, like obviously, like he's been able to just like run through teams, and that's on him as well. But how much credit can we give that to former offensive coordinator Kirk as well?
Thing is, though, like I agree with where you're coming from, but to be devil's advocate, Cologne they were happy to just give the ball off to Madre. They tried to pass it, but you kind of saw him ease off when they realized just let Madre deal with it. Whereas with Hamburg, you've seen, like, I'll stand by this. Cisse is not the best passing quarterback by any means. He's fantastic at scrambling, but he has work to do with pocket presence, staying in the pocket, throwing the ball, making the not overthrowing Gene Constant all the time.
Yeah,
but they have started to work that pass game in more. Like Jordan and Constant are now, like, from week 1 to week 5, there's a big difference in how they're incorporating them in the game.
Yeah.
So I think he's trying to make it more balanced than he was with Cologne.
Yeah, and I mean, I've hammered my point with Cisse, and I made a vow not to get on him too much going forward. But I mean, clearly he needs to develop in the passing game more. Getting the ball out on time, throwing anticipation. Even if it's just working the quick game and getting the ball in the hands of Gene and Lamar, and just let them do what they got to do. But that's why I think that the Northern Conference is so open, because, you know, you're playing. It's hard to beat a team twice, and now that there's film on those teams, it's going to make things even more difficult. Teams are just going to start stacking the box. That's I won't be surprised if they see like 7-8 man boxes the remaining of the season and just force them to throw the ball. So we'll see what happens. So my pick. So like I said, we're only doing 5, so you guys got the last 2. But I'm gonna take this guy that I have on my list because I don't think he'll be mentioned. But AJ Wentland from the Kings, the impact and the leadership he's had on that defense. He's averaging like 13 tackles a game, 2.5 tackles for loss, and they're starting to play better now. But I think if for some reason the Leipzig Kings could handle business the second half of the season and get that fourth seed, or for some reason even make or win the Northern Conference, I think it's going to be a big credit to the defense and what they've been able to do, especially in the second half of the season. Because as I mentioned, like this is where things are more difficult for offenses. Because now defense has film, they know what to repair. I think that's what hurt them in the Surge game, is that they didn't know what they were going to get. So you look at the score, it was 10-0. It's like, all right, well, now that I know who or what I'm preparing for, now it's going to be easy to play against those teams going forward. So I think AJ as a defensive player, if any defensive player is going to be considered, I think AJ would be considered for MVP candidate. I don't think he'll win, but I think he should at least be considered.
Yeah, for sure. And as well, I think at least someone on that like sort of front 7 in Leipzig should be in the conversation, definitely, because as I say, even though they've lost their first 2 games and they're making a turnaround now, that defense has been relentless and it has been turning up every game. So I think at least someone from there, like I would argue even like Zetterberg as well, I think haven't been brilliant, and he could maybe get a mention as well. But yeah, I agree with you on Wendland there.
So Adam, who we got we got 2 more spots left in this MVP candidate pool.
So I think there are some obvious ones, but I'm liking where you're coming from defense. So I'll throw in one of my defensive candidates. And I'll be honest, I'm torn between Darius Robinson on the Panthers and Kyle Kitchens on the Thunder. And I think to be MVP, you've got to be on a team that's winning and going far into the playoffs. So I don't think either of these will do, but I'm going to give it to Kyle Kitchens because he is an absolute animal. Like last week, he pretty much got a sack, a fumble recovery, and a touchdown all by himself. When he took off, literally no one was catching up to him. He is a dangerous man.
Kyle's got some wheels on him too.
Yeah,
I didn't think Kyle was that fast. Kyle's got some wheels on him.
He took off, didn't he?
You look on the screen, it's just Kyle gets the ball, it's just he's just running right into the end zone. All right, Joe, last spot. Who we got, my man?
Well, this is the thing. Now we've gone 2 defensive. I've got to make a choice between the 2 top wide receivers in the league. God, I feel bad for Carl Sweet, but I can't not have Quinton Pounds in there. Like he's got to be in the top 5. Yeah. The man, I've actually lost count on how many touchdowns he's got this year, but he's got to be on what we're nearing 10, or at least we're past 10 already.
I kid you not. I think after week 4, he had 10 touchdowns.
10, yeah, that's what
including
I thought.
Including a throwing touchdown, wasn't it?
Yeah, I had one of those as well. Yeah, it's nuts. This guy I think last week was his first week in which he had under 100 100 yards receiving, and he's still at like touchdowns. 88. Yeah,
he's
no
humble
touchdowns
as well. He's really humble.
Yeah, he loves to on the pitch, maybe not so humble, but off the pitch definitely. Some of his celebrations are good fun, but yeah, he is just Mr. Reliable as well. It's not just his yards after catch are great. The man can just run and find the space. He's got very safe hands as well. I mean, we knew this. We saw some of his highlights from college. There's that classic one that I think he's got pinned on his Twitter where he sort of catches it, gets going over his head, and it's just insane. The guy, apart from his, if it wasn't for his injuries, would he be playing in the ELF? Would he be somewhere sort of maybe in Canada or, even pushing for the NFL? Possibly. Yeah, he's just, this guy's just an absolute monster. And I think especially the first 4 weeks, he was probably leading the MVP race for me. I think he's been that good. Whether now Cologne can sort of get over the speed bump that they had last week and keep moving on. As you say, after 4 weeks, he had 10 touchdowns. He could end up with over 20 if he kept going at that rate. And if he gets over 20 receiving touchdowns, no matter how well like Zach or Glenn play, it's so hard to overlook him as possibly being that number one in that race.
He gets 20 touchdowns, Cologne would be in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And it sounds,
you'd hope.
And it sounds crazy because you got to get him 10 more touchdowns. But if he gets 20 touchdowns, he's had a sizable impact that Cologne would be in the playoffs, I think, personally. And you'd hope.
Yeah. It comes down to that thing that their head coach said. It's like, as long as we beat them by 1 point, we've won.
Yeah.
It's like their defense can't let the other guys score as easily as they can.
That's the thing, though, isn't it? Yeah. Because he scored 4 against the Dragons and they lost that game. That's the only thing that worries me about it. And
based on how their season's going, they let that one slip away. But so now that we have our top 5, right? And I think we're all in pretty much the same boat here. Like based on our top 5, we had to pick an MVP. Who would we pick?
Projecting the fact that I think the MVP has to be on like a at least going to a champion, like the semi-finals in the playoffs. I think it needs to go to Zach.
Yeah, I think at least halfway through the season, Zach's the MVP of the league.
Yeah, and I think MVP is biased towards quarterbacks just because that's their importance on the field, and it's like one of my mentions is I wanted to make sure I chucked his name in. Erdman for the Vikings has also been phenomenal. That whole team's phenomenal, but Zach Edwards, like, it just seems like he has something about him.
Yeah, he's easy to root for. He's fun to watch. Seeing worst one, I'm glad they brought him back, but seeing like how Barcelona as a team played last year, with obviously being down a lot, him forcing the throw, him and him and the connection Gene had, and now seeing like who they are this year, he's the same exact guy, but the team's better,
Yeah.
So
they have a line.
I think it's safe to say that Zach is definitely the MVP midway through the season so far. So, but all right, fellas. So we've reached the turning point in the season. All right, the honeymoon. I mentioned this before. The honeymoon phase is over. Everyone is familiar with each other. We know who teams are now. Second half of the season is going to provide a little bit more urgency. Teams have film on each other. Teams that are not making players, in my opinion, they still have to play hard. If those players want to remain in the ELF, they still got to put good film out. So, I don't expect like the team like the Surge or the Rams to just roll over and quit.
Yeah.
But I think guys are still going to try to put good film out because, if you for lack of purposes, if you shit the bed and on a bad team, you may not even be in this league next year or years to come. So you want to make sure that obviously if the team's on it, you're still putting good film out. But anyway, second half of the season, there's a lot to look forward to. I want to get you guys' thoughts on some storylines that the fans could be watching heading into the second half of the season. So Joe, I'll start with you on this one. What are some storylines you think would be interesting to take a look at?
I think it's who's going to get that second spot in the Central Conference. I got a feeling that is going to be the 4th playoff team. And I think, in my opinion, I think Vienna are just that level ahead of the Galaxy and the Raiders at the moment. So I think it's that fight between Frankfurt and Tyrrell. Who is going to take that spot? See, the Raiders are sort of in pole position at the moment. However, the Galaxy have been improving over the last few weeks. However, last week's result was massive. What I would say for Frankfurt, the positives are their hardest two games left really are the Raiders and the Vikings, but they've got to play them both at home. So that could be a big swing for them. But yeah, for me, that's the big one. I know that you look around the league and we've sort of said that the North Conference, if you want to make the playoffs, you're going to have to win. I think the Fire, of course, are still in that with this from the South and the Centurions, whatever happens to them. But I just have that feeling that the Raiders and the Galaxy are going to keep winning and winning, and it's going to be down to one of those. And those interconference games are huge. Right now, my money is just on the Raiders purely because they have the lead. But it could be either.
Most definitely. I was pretty much lockstep with you on that one too. With the Raiders haven't been blowing teams out, but they've been playing better and better each week.
Yeah.
Their second half of the season is very favorable. Obviously, with their one biggest matchup against Vienna, but I think they'll probably be favored in all those games up to that point. We've reached the turning point in the season, all right? The honeymoon, I mentioned this before, the honeymoon phase is over. Everyone is familiar with each other. We know who teams are now. Second half of the season is going to provide a little bit more urgency. Teams have film on each other. Teams that are not making players, in my opinion, they still have to play hard. If those players want to remain in the ELF, they still got to put good film out. So, I don't expect like the team like the Surge or the Rams to just roll over and quit.
Yeah.
But I think guys are still going to try to put good film on because, if you for lack of purposes, if you shit the bed and, on a bad team, you may not even be in this league next year or years to come. So you want to make sure that obviously if your team's not in it, you're still putting good film out. But anyway, second half of the season, there's a lot to look forward to. I want to get you guys' thoughts on some storylines that the fans could be watching head into the second half of the season. So, Joe, I'll start with you on this one. What are some storylines you think would be interesting to take a look at?
I think it's who's going to get that second spot in the Central Conference. I got a feeling that is going to be the fourth playoff team. And I think, in my opinion, I think Vienna are just that level ahead of the Galaxy and the Raiders at the moment. So I think it's that fight between Frankfurt and Tyrrell. Who is going to take that spot? See, the Raiders are sort of in pole position at the moment. However, the Galaxy have been improving over the last few weeks. However, last week's result was massive. What I would say for Frankfurt, the positives are their hardest two games left really are the Raiders and the Vikings. But they've got to play them both at home. So that could be a big swing for them. But yeah, for me, that's the big one. I know that you look around the league and we've sort of said that the North Conference, if you want to make the playoffs, you're going to have to win. I think the Fire, of course, are still in that with this from the South and the Centurions, whatever happens to them. But I just have that feeling that the Raiders and the Galaxy are going to keep winning and winning, and it's going to be down to one of those. And those interconference games are huge. Right now, my money is just on the Raiders purely because they have the lead, but it could be either.
Most definitely. I was pretty much lockstep with you on that one too. With the Raiders haven't been blowing teams out, but they've been playing better and better each week.
Yeah.
Their second half of the season is very favorable. Obviously, with their one biggest matchup against Vienna, but I think they'll probably be favored in all those games up to that point. All right, Adam, some storylines. We got some storylines for the second half of the season.
See, I did also have will the reigning champs make the playoffs, but I brought a second, and it's which wide receiver will finish at the top. Because I think Quentin Pound is holding that, but there's Malik Stanley, Robotai is close behind him. But it's interesting that Jordan and Constant won't compete for it because they're splitting, but they're both looking better.
Yeah.
Even number 16 for the Rams, his name can't remember off the top of my head, but he looked really good last week.
Hextall.
Yeah, Hextall. Yeah. There's a couple of top receivers and it'll be interesting to see who reigns over them all.
He probably doesn't because he's on a team that's, one of the top 3 teams in the league. But if you're Gene Constant, do you miss playing for Barcelona?
I think you've got to. You've got to miss playing with Zach, who will launch the ball down at you at every opportunity.
And they're good friends. They're good friends. They train together in the off season, stuff like that. That's one thing I was wondering. Obviously, he's on a team where he's doing well. Their team's doing well right now in the league too. So, but that's just something curious to think about. But something that I have written down. I actually agreed with you on your Raiders point. I had the Raiders as a team that could possibly not even make a push for that 4th spot, but may make a push for the top spot in the Central. Yeah. Because they still got to play Vienna. Vienna still has to play Barcelona again. They got to play Frankfurt with a healthy Jacob Sullivan. So Vienna has a little bit of a tougher road. And I think, again, for the Raiders, they'll be favoring most of their matchups the second half of the season. Obviously, they got the Galaxy and the Vikings, but I think they're in a position where they could possibly shoot for that top spot if things start going away for the Vikings in the second half. One more thing I had was as a dark horse to get the 4th spot, or not the 4th spot, as a dark horse to win their conference. I think if you could get better play out of your quarterback and limit the turnovers, and we mentioned this team a lot so far, I think the Kings would be an interesting team in the Northern Conference. For one, that thing is wide open. That the quarterback play in that division is not the greatest compared to some of the other quarterbacks in the other conferences. And they probably, outside of Hamburg, they probably have the best defense in that conference. Mm-hmm. They're in a position where they don't play a Barcelona, they don't play a Vienna. They play everyone in their conference twice. They play the Fire, which, to be honest, they should have won if it wasn't for 4 turnovers at the end of the season. They should have beat the Panthers if it wasn't for a turnover at the end of the game. They got the Surge again. They're in a position where they might be able to push Hamburg, and Hamburg still has to play, Barcelona, the Fire again, and all the other teams in their conference. So similar to the Raiders, they kind of have the easier part of the second half versus the top teams in their conference.
Yeah, I agree. I do agree with you there. I think there's a lot that's been sort of untouched with the Kings. There's all that potential that they haven't brought out. And you're right, a lot of the losses have been close. They've been really close. And it's their own mistakes that have let them down. Whereas we look at the team like the Fire, the fact that they don't make mistakes is probably the reason why they've won those games. It shows you how the turnover battle, and I know there's someone on Twitter who does the turnover battle graphic, and the Kings, I'm pretty sure they're right at the bottom because they don't take the ball away anywhere near as much, even with that great defense, than they do giving it away. So if they can fix that, and it looks like last week is when they were playing against the Surge, if that's an indication of how they're going to move from here on, they definitely could be up there.
They're on thin ice though. Like they can't really, they can't really afford a 14-0 loss versus Hamburg, or they can't afford 4 turnovers your last 4 drives versus the Fire losing the game. They can't afford those mistakes in the second half if they want to make that push.
For sure.
Games, some top matchups in the second half that are going to have some implications on the playoffs. Adam, in terms of, the list that you have, what are some of the games that you're excited to watch the second half? As we know, these are going to have playoff implications, and they're going to be good to keep an eye on.
Yeah, so I've brought 4 games. One of them is today, Vikings at Dragons. Yeah. Obviously, it's important. It's the 2 undefeated teams. There's only going to be one by the end of today.
Yeah.
And that is, the way I like to think of it is the Vikings are an amazingly solid, all-round, consistent team. The Dragons have got playmakers on every side. They can win on special teams, defense, and offense. But they haven't gone up against the force like the Vikings yet. So I'm intrigued for that one. I've got the Raiders at Vikings on the 24th of July, which, as you mentioned, that's the Raiders-Vikings games, I think, are always going to be belting. This one I've got here. You guys are quite high up on the Kings. I maybe less so. I'm intrigued in both the Thunder and the Panthers. As kind of surprise playoff teams. I think if they can pull it together, their defenses can pull them through. And I've got the Thunder at the Panthers on the 14th of August. And then my final game, it ties into what we've all been saying about Galaxy Raiders. Raiders at Galaxy, 28th of August. That's probably going to be whoever wins that gets the wild card spot potentially.
Yeah. All right, Joe, who you got, man?
Yeah, so I got a lot the same that Adam did. I've got Raiders at Vienna 24th of July. I've got the Sea Devils at the Fire also on the 24th of July. I just have a feeling that the Fire are going to make sure they don't let Glenn have a game like he did against them last time out. And I just think that there could be a bit of a revenge game going on there. Of course, I got Vikings at the Galaxy. It's a lot of these are Central Conference. Okay, and obviously the Raiders at Galaxy that Adam just mentioned. And towards the end, so my team that I think surprise team, because I think the Panthers have got so many. I feel they've got so many players in place, and they've just paid up 40% all the way through the season. They just haven't shown us what they're capable of.
Yeah.
I've got the Panthers at the Sea Devils on the 28th of August. I have a feeling that could be the game where the Sea Devils are going to try and push to clinch that North Division. And I don't know if the Panthers will improve. I don't really believe in what I've seen, but I just feel as if they have got the pieces too. But if the Panthers do miraculously turn around, that could be not just a big game in those two team seasons, but also, of course, if the Kings or the Thunder start improving, it could impact them as well. So it's one of those conference games deep into the season, which I think will have quite a lot of implications going on. So they're the main ones. But it seems like all these games are all they all get grouped on the same day. Like the 24th of July looks like a great round of fixtures. The 28th of August also looks like a great round of fixtures. They're quite similar to ones that we saw last week in week 5. So it'll be good to watch.
Most definitely. The two games I'm kind of interested in are on the last week of the season, week 14, because I'm curious how these teams are going to be set up leading up to this point. But it is the Kings Fire and it's the Sea Devils Barcelona. Depending on what happens, with teams and, throughout the season, there's a potential that, maybe the Southern Conference is on the line that day when the Fire play the Kings or when the Dragons play the Sea Devils or vice versa for the Northern Conference. I feel like those two games are going to be interesting, to watch and keep an eye on for that last week of the season. Another one I had similar to you, Adam, Raiders Vikings in week 8. Vikings just edged out of the Raiders in that first game. This goes back to my point where the Raiders can sneakily maybe have a chance to win that conference. If they handle their business in the second half, they're definitely going to have the opportunity. But I think, you can never count out a rivalry like that, especially with two teams that know each other and they play each other probably for championship games, in the past in the Austrian League. So that's one game that I'm definitely keeping an eye on. The last one, week 11, Vikings Galaxy. Obviously, I mentioned it before with a healthy Jacob Sullivan back. You got Reese Horn. He actually has a number one receiver. I don't think it's fair to judge the Galaxy off that game versus Vikings, but it's football. It is what it is with injuries. Only thing that's going to hurt them is that, they got a lot of injuries on defense with, Sebastian Gautier and now Josh Posnowski out. So it'll be interesting to see, but I think with the signings of Nazari and, him pairing up with Sebastian, they'll be able to at least hold their own going the second stretch of the season. I think with Sebastian and Josh, it gave them a little bit more flexibility to run certain schemes, but I think they get more back to a traditional, 4-3 scheme, and they still have the guys to match up with teams in the league. So
they picked up Carlos Brawns, didn't they? He was CFL picked, but then dropped again. He was a beast for the Panthers last year.
Yep, and he's gonna pairing him up with Anthony Anthony Hoare in the middle, because I think they had Buffett, but then they released Buffett, and then they picked up Carlos Bronze. So upgrade that position for the Galaxy, and it's definitely one team to watch. So obviously the second half of the season, we're going to be interested in watching like a lot of games, a lot of matchups, a lot of players. And as we head towards, clanking for the playoffs and all that stuff. Before the season, the league announced the addition of 3 new teams. So there's got to be a 4th team coming. And I've heard some rumblings, but I kind of want to get you guys' opinion on who do you think that 4th team will be, or where that 4th team will come from in 2023. Joe, I'll start with you.
I think I believe that it's pretty set on who it's going to be, and I believe it's going to be Paris, and it's going to be the Musketeers that are going to be the team coming in. There's been a lot of stuff behind the scenes. A lot of people on the ELF Reddit have been sort of investigating and looking, and there's just a lot of the commission has links to this Paris team. There's people within there in business as well. And also, I think a French team would be brilliant. There's so much French talent out there.
Yeah.
I just feel as if that is the next move. West Europe might need just another team as well, just to kind of balance it all out. Because we've gone east and we've gone like south, like we've gone as south as we can go with Turkey. And I think it's time to sort of bring it back to our neck of the woods and have a French team.
What about you, Adam? Who you got?
Yes, I do agree with Joe. I think Paris is the one they're all hinting at, but I also agree that I think they need to balance it out in Europe, in that they're very, very central and eastern. So I've brought a couple of ideas. I think London Monarchs is the one that's bounced around the most. But I mean, Joe living just outside London, I'm in England. Logistically, that's going to be a hard team to bring together.
Yeah.
And then Amsterdam Royals, they're a previous team. It makes sense. They're like similar to France. They're in a good geographical location. But personally, I want a Scandinavian team. I want maybe Helsinki Roosters from Finland, Stockholm Mean Machines from Sweden. One that I make more sense location-wise, again, would be the Copenhagen Towers from Denmark.
Yeah.
But they're all like top of their leagues with multiple championships, which is what we're seeing come into the ELF. The ones that competition's no longer there, they need to take that next step. I think they're all teams that can make that step.
I have on my other show, The Scoop, I do with Perfect Purpose, who is based in Finland and has all like the inside scoop and stuff like that. I would love to get a Scandinavian team. If a Scandinavian team, I think it will come from Sweden first out of all the Scandinavian countries up there. Copenhagen, that's a nice draw. I mean, if they were able to come in, you think they bring back Randy into the mix? That seems like an easy transition, right?
We would like that, wouldn't we?
Yeah,
there's a lot of, especially a lot of the imports they've played in, like the Scandinavian league teams like to be the ones that attract us. Like Alpha Jallo for the Kings last year.
Yeah,
he went back. He's gone back to Sweden, I think. Like there's a very high level of talent there, so I think it makes sense.
Yeah, I think with the ultimate goal, I think they want to get to 24 teams. I think At some point, I think getting to London's going to be big. I think getting to the Scandinavian countries is going to be big. And I think exploring Western Europe is going to be huge too. Some of the areas that I'm going to say some of the countries or cities that I feel like they should tap into. I think getting a team in Madrid would be interesting and provide different dynamic in Spain. I've heard some rumblings back in February that there were talks or looking into possibly Madrid. I don't know if or when it will happen, but I think getting a team in Madrid would be interesting. But I think Amsterdam, as you mentioned, is a place to keep an eye on. But it does seem like a lot of the momentum is moving towards Paris. So it'll be interesting to see when that will be announced. It might be announced the championship game. Or like they did last year, but adding another market to the mix is only going to continue to drive the revenue and everything in the league too. So that would be interesting to see. But hey, fellas, I appreciate you coming on. Adam, my first time meeting you, man. I appreciate talking some ball. Joe, welcome back to the show. Tell Joe Burrow I said what's up in the back. You know? And then, hey, to your fellas, Craig and Tim, tell them I say hello. It was fun talking some ball with you guys. Again, we're heading into that. We're turning the point now. We're heading into the second half of ELF. A lot of things are possibly going to change, and we're going to be in for a ride. And I'm interested to see, just like these guys, in terms of what's going on. Adam, Joe, if you guys want to, plug your show real quick, where can people follow you guys? Where can people watch your show at?
Joe, where can you find our socials?
Yeah, sorry, I've got motorbikes flying by, so apologies if you can hear them over me talking. But our Twitter and Instagram, look at TAFS_UK. We're on Facebook at That American Football Show. YouTube, just type in That American Football Show. Like Jamal, we do weekly review episodes. We do player interviews, all that. So yeah, YouTube, Spotify, That American Football Show, Apple Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts with audio and video. So yeah, go check us out there.
Most definitely check them out. Give them a follow, subscribe to the channel. As I told Joe last time, this won't be the last time we chop it up, and I had him on again. Adam, I'm going to tell you, we're definitely going to chop it up again.
Absolutely, yes, mate.
Most definitely.
Hard work, they